This is Dread, and in today's video topic, we are going to be doing another episode of the Solo Character Found series. This series where I take a character from level 1 and push it all the way to around 300-ish corruption to figure out if it's cycle starterable, its cycle starter capabilities, how cheap is it, how expensive it is, how fun it is to play, and this time it's going to be Meteor Sorcerer. Yes, you heard that right. Meteor Sorcerer. Turns out there is actually a viable way of cycle starting Meteor. Listen up, Meteor lovers, because this is going to be the video for you. Now, if you haven't already, I would heavily suggest leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, as that is the best way of supporting content like this on YouTube, and it's the best way of making sure that I know that you want more content like this. Now, with all that being said, let's go into detail on the build, shall we? So, if you are aware of the meta of last Epoch in any capacity, you know that Meteor is the butt of almost every joke. Meteor is one of the lesser utilized skills, not because of its flashiness. It's very flashy and fun to play with. It does a decent amount of damage, but its mana cost can be absolutely absurd. In a world where most skills have around 30 to 20 to like 10 mana costs, Meteor is a skill that has 50 base mana costs, and of course if you enable certain things in its tree to make it do a bunch of damage, it even goes all the way up to 120. Now thankfully I have my Meteor mana cost down to 80, but that's because we're utilizing the mana efficiency node inside of it, but that is a big tax in terms of like skill points, right? So that's a little annoying. But yeah, we have an 80 mana Meteor. Now it's very hard to sustain that. I have done my fair share of trying to make Meteor Sorc work, but it turns out the answer was in front of my face the entire time. So screw all these stupid dumb support skills that do nothing for us other than every so often like pressing a button to get a little bit more damage. Turns out you can run not just one, not just two, but you can run 3 whole different abilities to sustain your mana. Now, that sounds cancer at first, and for me, I thought it was cancer at first too, hence why I never tried it until now, but it turns out it's a lot better than I thought it was. So what's going on? What's going on with the build? So the idea here is we're spamming as many meteors as possible, as quickly as possible, and trying to get to negative mana. Then we utilize either Mana Strike or Focus, which both have nodes inside of them that allow them to gain extra mana based on when you're out of mana. So for instance, for Mana Strike, you just swipe once, bam, you have like 170 mana, or if you click on Focus, you get 40% of your missing mana back instantly. And the beautiful thing about these skills is they don't require you to sit and channel focus. They don't require you to sit and use Mana Strike. You simply just click a button, bam, you have all your mana back, which makes them significantly less insufferable. I'm talking like multi-level of less suffering in general. Like, oh my goodness, it is so much better if you just simply do it this way. The reason why this is working so well is because since we have 3 different outlets of gaining mana, through Teleport giving us a free skill, through Mana Strike giving us 170 mana, and Focus giving us 40% of our missing mana back, it means that we can consistently pump out as many meteors as humanly possible. This is the most amount of meteors I've been able to consistently pump out on a new character, on a fresh character, by the way. I leveled as Meteor from level 12 and got it to empowered monos, played with Meteor all the way, and let me tell you, having access to all of this extra free mana made the build so much better to play, because of course you just burst down, shoot out a bunch of meteors, gain mana real quick with one button press, shoot out a bunch of meteors again, click another button, and then as long as you do that rotation, you do just fine. Now, one benefit of spending a very large amount of mana like we are doing currently, we can utilize mana spent gained as ward. Now this is also another mechanic I've been wanting to utilize, and I thought it would be perfect with Meteor because, you know, mana spent gained as ward, you have a skill that costs 80 mana. Of course it sounds like a good idea, right? Well, usually it's not a good idea, but in this case it is, because we are just consuming that much mana. If you're like watching my mana bar and watching it go down, we are consuming well over like 400 mana per second with this setup. It is absolutely ridiculous. Now, what's cool about ward gained as mana spent gained as ward, right? The idea here is we utilize something like Strand of Souls, which gives us 180% of our mana as ward. So for instance, if we use a Strand of Souls, like a max rolled one, we get around 150 ward per cast of Meteor, which is good, right? Then that's on top of all the other mana spent gained as ward that mage has access to. You have special base types that allow you to get even more mana spent gained as ward. You have idle types. You have a bunch of different ways of getting a bunch of ward very quickly with this setup. And of course, it goes straight to the moon once you get a lot more ward retention, which I don't have because this character has no gear, or if you get more mana spent gained as ward, which I have the bare minimum of because, like I said, I have no gear because this character was just started yesterday. Literally yesterday morning was when this character was started, just to give you an idea. So that means between then and now, I've managed to make a viable and playable and fun Meteor build that isn't pain champ to play. Now, there's been a few other ways of playing Meteor. Like, for instance, there's been a few people that'll like get to like 1100 mana and like spend their entire mana bar to like kill T4 Jirla. And those are cool and all, don't get me wrong, but I'd rather play a build that like is actually viable outside of T4 Jirla. Hence why I've been trying so hard to make a Meteor build that actually functions. And I think this is it. This is literally the first time I've ever played Meteor where I've actually felt like it's a good build. I'll be honest, it really does feel like a good enough build. Being able to cycle start like this really shows its capabilities off. It's a little squishy at times, but like I said, that's because I did not get my blessings properly. I didn't get my armor blessings. So this is without blessings like the proper ones. So that's why it looks a little squishy. Now, with all that being said, let's go in game and talk about the build more in detail, shall we? Alright, so here we are in game with the character, Meteor Mage. Let's talk about the skill tree. So I just want to let you know the skill tree looks scuffed as fuck, okay? Just to be real with you, that is because we need a lot of different things, a lot of different points, and a lot of this can be cut once you get better gear than I currently have. I have bad gear, which means I need more passive points to make up for it, okay? Like for instance, I have 2 points in area. It's like the perfect amount of area. If you had area on your gloves, or if you had area on your amulet, you could dump the area here and focus it on more damage like Craterborn or whatever. If you had like, let's say like a catalyst, a wand and a catalyst, you could dump these points, although the large meteors are pretty good. So I've been using them a lot. The large meteors are pretty good for consistency's sake, so I would be very careful with taking out of this. I would make sure that your meteors are hitting consistently. And yeah, and of course, a +4 to meteor would help. But yeah, like generally with this kind of setup, you're gonna have to like mess around with the points a lot. Now, for Meteor, the most important stuff, of course, is getting the base crit here so you can use a staff. If you have more flat damage from other sources, you could run a catalyst into wand instead and then swap this out. Mana efficiency, of course, on top of the twin meteors, getting us down to 90 mana instead of 120. Much better for us overall, as it allows us to spam meteors that much more. More meteors, more damage, of course. Number of meteors, of course, 3. Grabbing Craterborn, some points in Craterborn, some points in Crushing Force, some points in Infernal Descent, mainly to get the multiplicative damages up, right? Obviously, as you get better gear, you can like take points out of this, put them in there. If you get better crit, you can actually take a point out of this and put it somewhere else. In theory, you can actually end up with a lot of extra points if you invest in this character more, which would make your Meteor do significantly more damage than what I'm doing right now. Now for Mana Strike, it's the TLDR, it's the same Mana Strike tree I've used a lot of late with Mana Cleave to get the double mana gained. That applies to the Reclamation, get the percent mana gain as well. Critical mana for even more extra mana and the extra base crit. Essentially as much mana as humanly possible, and now with this setup you can get like 170 mana per swing. Very good. Teleport, mainly just the free spell shenanigans, right? With the stun immunity, the cooldown recovery speed and stuff. I actually went for mana efficiency on teleport to eventually you do want to actually grab this node here for global cooldown recovery speed later on when you get like maybe take a point out of somewhere else, maybe out of like this armor, but armor's pretty good right now. stereotypical flame ward tree, not really much to discuss here. Focus, the main thing we care about is getting null profusion and null infusion. So we get 40% of our mana when we go negative, which is very important. It just allows us, essentially, when you're walking around, don't channel focus, simply just tap it. Oh, wait 1 second. Just tap focus, bam, get mana, okay? Tap mana strike, get mana. Use teleport, cast meteor, get free mana, essentially, right? That's the idea with the skill setup. Now, let's talk about our passives that are important. Mainly, getting as much HP as possible so that we can abuse Reactive Ward and Silver Rune on top of utilizing a Twisted Heart. Get a bunch of Ward for free, right? When you're doing mana spent gain as ward shenanigans, you really want a base amount of HP, or you want to be running a vessel setup or like low life or something on top of everything so that you have a base amount of ward on top of the mana spent gain as ward. You don't want to use mana spent gain as ward as your only defensive layer, because sometimes you won't be casting, you won't be spending mana, and you will die. Sorcerer here, just stereotypical sorcerer stuff, the spell crit, the mana regen, the cast speed, the crit on intelligent stuff, the fire pen and leech. Eventually you'd grab Archmage for the flat damage, and then Recollection as well for the cooldown recovery speed, but I wasn't high enough level. Rune Master is very important, mainly because not only does it give us a very large amount of cast speed to allow us to dump our mana quickly, because that's important so we can rotate quicker, right? It also gives us our intelligence and some extra ward gained on cast, some extra crit. Eventually you can get extra area as well from Edict of the Scion. This is actually really strong, as this represents a whole idol worth of area eventually, which means that, you know, you could actually dump an idol out and then go for a Throne of Ambition, which will be 40% more damage. You eventually want to do that, right? Is dump out one of those things. This HP node would be great to grab, but like I said, our points are very, very fickle, very, very fickle points for passives right now. And that's pretty much it for passives that are important. Let's talk about blessings. Spell leech here, of course. This spell leech on top of the life leech from Lavamancer is enough to sustain yourself even with Twisted Heart. Lightning res, of course, here. Crit avoid, armor flat here, and then eventually armor percent. This should be armor percent, and that would help a lot right now. But yeah, that's pretty much for blessings. To talk about gear, there's no mandatory pieces for this gear build, like at all, like mandatory, no mandatory uniques or anything, but uniques you should be looking out for and eventually farm for is a Throne of Ambition, of course, a Strand of Souls, because it can roll up to 180% of mana spent gained as ward. This means every single time you cast Meteor, you're going to get like, what is it? About 180 ward per cast or something like that, very close to that, right? So you definitely want that. Twisted Heart is simply just a lot of cast speed, a lot of armor, a lot of HP, and it also represents a +1 to Meteor, which is the most important part, because we want as many plus levels to Meteor as possible with this setup, which is good. Other items that are like eventually you want but aren't mandatory early on, a really good Dragon Staff with +1 to elemental skills, mana regen to allow you to be able to pump out more meteors, crit chance, of course, so we can actually cap our crit. Eventually you want the fire pen on the suffix there. Helmet, mana spent gained as ward on the implicit and the prefix, intelligence as well after that. For the helmet here, mana spent gained as ward plus the meteor. You'd want this on the mana spent gained as ward chest piece, but I wasn't able to do that because we got a +3 meteor instead, more important. But eventually you want that chest piece with like +4 to meteor, the mana spent gained as ward. And all of that combined leads to you to have a very large amount of mana spent to gain as ward. So as we cycle through our mana, we get a bunch of free ward, which is great. Amulet here, you do need one affix of shred armor on hit, probably at least 100%. This can be on the gloves or the amulet, either way. As long as you have shred, you're good. This obviously could be on a better base, but I didn't drop anything better. Rings here, just res and damage, intelligence, crit, spell damage, fire damage, stuff like that. Like I said, belt here, Strand of Souls. gloves here. Eventually you want area on your amulet and your gloves. The reason why you want area is because, as you can see, meteors, they fall in a random pattern, and to increase consistency of single target on hitting single targets with your meteors, you want as much area as humanly possible. That's why we run area idols as well. So you want as much area as possible. Then of course boots, movement speed, HP, intelligence, HP would be fine. Of course relic, twisted heart, with whatever mods you can get on it. Obviously, generally you just care about the plus levels and the percent health on the implicit. And that's pretty much it for the gearing. For the idols, like I said, area. Now the perfect idols would be area and mana spent gained as ward. The perfect idols here would be mana spent gained as ward 3x1, same thing on top, and then res idols or HP idols to fill out the rest. Maybe dump one idol for a Throne of Ambition so that you can do the 40% more damage. That's also an option. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the character this time. That's pretty much it for the build. With all that being said, guys, this has been Dread. I have to go do something else. Bye.